Ben Simons, and the mayor's mama is around here somewhere. So yeah, you could give a whistle, then we know it's you.
Whistle.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. There's the young whistle. So it's a town that's done some really amazing, phenomenal things, you know. And I would like to actually invite Stacy, if you're out there somewhere, up to sing maybe on this one, if you're up for it.
Yeah.
This one. Heck yeah.
All right. Why not?
Look what hat I got out of the car.
There she is.
Ooh, yeah. I hope no one's going to be too mad at me about my Yoncalla digs. Uh-oh, they are mad. Total silence. All right, let's do this. This song is called Yoncalla Moon. It was inspired by, of course, many of my days out there and all those many wonderful people that I met. Yoncalla moon, shining bright. Yoncalla moon, shining bright. Yoncalla moon, shining bright. Kick off your boots, we stay tonight. Kick off your boots, we stay tonight. Okay, I remember the part. Calapooia Creek, it's on the rise. Calapooia Creek, it's on the rise. Calapooia Creek, it's on the rise. Kick off your boots, yeah, we stay tonight. Kick off your boots, we stay tonight. Ooh. Mighty Umpqua like a bird in flight. Mighty Umpqua like a bird in flight. Mighty Umpqua like a bird in flight. Kick off your boots, we stay the night. Kick off your boots, we stay the night. Here we go, yeah. You can't ghost town when the moon is bright. Can't get across when the water's high. Only a fool would ever leave this sight. Kick off your boots, we stay the night. Kick off your boots, we stay the night. Yoncalla moon, shining bright. Yoncalla moon, shining bright. Yoncalla moon, shining bright. Kick off your boots, we stay the night. Kick off your boots, we stay the night. Kick off your boots. Kick off your boots, we stay the night. She also was the mayor of Yoncalla.
Yeah. Right.
She did some good stuff too.
So right now, my school, North Douglas and Yoncalla combined for football. And so it's the Warriors and the Eagles, so they call them the War Eagles. But in my band room, they call them the Weagles. Which I find really fun.
You didn't tell me that. I was not prepared for that. That's good. That's working into the banter next time. Okay,
Yeah.
good. So like the two more, a couple more?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Cool. Well, since you guys are in a good mood, I'm gonna change all that. Not really. Just tell you a little bit about history, which you can go
Boring.
I know, right? So, in review, I grew up in British Columbia. I don't know if you remember that, but it will be on the quiz at the end. So, grew up in British Columbia. My dad was he was part of the Doukhobor community that is an immigrant group that lives in Western Canada. A long story, as short as I can possibly make it, is that the Doukhobors were a pacifist group that were living in Tsarist Russia. And Tsarist Russia is not a pleasant place for pacifist groups. And so the Doukhobor people were being sent off to work camps in the Siberia, gulags, etc. And Leo Tolstoy took an interest. He had taken an interest in these people before they were being tortured by the Tsar, but that was just part of the appeal, I guess. But he did study and live with the Doukhobors for a time, and was really horrified by the things that were happening to them in Russia, and so implored Queen Victoria to allow these people to seek asylum and refuge in Canada. And she agreed. And so boatloads of Russian Doukhobor people arrived on the shores of Canada in the late 1800s, mid-late 1800s, and were granted asylum on the prairies, Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And the kind of the terms were that the Canadian government were going to allow these people to live as they had in Russia, which was communally, essentially. So they farmed these huge plots of land, big gardens, horses. They did all of their field work by hand. They were really a simple people, vegetarians. They just really were after this peaceful life. Their kind of motto is toil and a peaceful life. And that, everything was all well and good until the First World War broke out, and the Canadians needed some men to fill boots in Europe. And they approached the Doukhobors, and some of them agreed, and some of them didn't. They were like, hey, this is kind of not what we talked about, guys. So as time went by, there were more and more sort of calls by the Canadians and calls by the Canadian government in particular to begin to chip away at this insular group, assimilate this particular group. My grandparents were in these insular communities. And some of the people did that. They were sort of assimilating into Canadian culture, maintaining their roots, but other people really felt strongly that they were not going to assimilate, and so they began a migration west, and that was my grandfather and my grandmother. And they wound up in these very, very insular communities in the mountains of western British Columbia. And they schooled their children at home. They demonstrated wildly against the Canadian government, whether you agree with it or not, them's the facts. And the types of demonstrations that they used to do were to burn down their own houses in a show of non-material possession. They used to have nude protests, and of course everyone was extremely scandalized and clutching their pearls watching the nude protests. And these sorts of things just to piss off everybody. And the Canadian government decided that that was enough of these rabble-rousers, and in the dark of night in 1953 they went into the village, and they abducted these school-aged children that were in the village, claiming that they needed to be taken to school and taught the Canadian way of life. So my father was one of the children that was rounded up. He was 5 years old, and he was taken along with his twin sister in a pre-dawn raid, literally called Operation Snatch, 1953. And he was put in an RCMP vehicle, and he was trucked 50 miles north on a winding Canadian highway, and he lived for 6 years of his life in a boarding school, and he saw his parents through a chain-link fence once a month. And these are the kinds of boarding schools that we hear a lot about with Native American residential schools. And of course, those situations were generational, and horrifying. Being the daughter of someone who survived that, you know, I didn't know what it was all about. He always told me, oh, Dad was in kid jail. And I thought, oh, funny, kid jail, whatever that is. And then I started reading more about it, and it really was kid jail. And, you know, looking back now as an adult, I see how things played out for me as a kid and how they still play out today. And I decided to write a song not about his experience, because that's not my story to tell, but about my experience of being his daughter. And the song is called Nashi Ludi, which in Russian means our people. That's a term that Doukhobors use to refer to one another. Nashi Ludi.